Serpent's Oath. In the ancient kingdom of Mithral, where shadows cling to the edges of forgotten lore, tales were whispered of a time before the first kings. Legend spoke of a pact made in blood and magic, binding the land to a power older than the stars. Deep within the forest of Eldhaven, where twisted trees guarded ancient secrets, it was said the heart of this oath lay hidden, kept alive by those who wielded its power, and by those who sought to break it. For centuries, the kingdom thrived under the rule of the Valen bloodline, its walls fortified by mysterious allies and creatures born of myth. But as the years passed, the line grew darker, and whispers of a prophecy echoed through the courts, a prophecy foretelling the fall of the kingdom at the hands of its own blood. Fear gripped the throne, and the forest of Eldhaven became a forbidden place, shrouded in superstition and dread. Now, as King Valen's rule descends into tyranny, a loyal soldier named Alaric is summoned to Eldhaven to meet a sorceress with a voice like silk and eyes that hold ancient truths. Her name is Seraphine, and she claims a power that could shift the fate of Mithral. Bound by loyalty but haunted by doubt, Alaric steps into the shadows of prophecy, unaware that he stands at the edge of a story spun by fate, a story of betrayal, magic, and a kingdom bound to a serpent's oath. For in the end, no king is safe from the secrets that lie within his blood. Chapter 1. The Summoning. Beneath the cold silver moonlight, Alaric stepped into the ancient forest of Eldhaven, a realm of twisted trees with roots that seemed to pulse like veins. Shadows danced over the moss-covered ground as ethereal blue wisps floated through the air, their faint glow casting eerie patterns over the forest floor. The air was thick with magic, and every sound seemed amplified: the rustle of leaves, the soft hoot of an owl, the distant howl of a creature too far to see. Alaric moved cautiously, his boots sinking into the damp earth. His cloak, dark as midnight, billowed in the cold wind as he approached the clearing ahead. In the center stood a cloaked figure. Her name was Seraphine, a sorceress rumored to wield powers that could command mythical creatures. Her aura shimmered with an unsettling blue light that twisted around her, and her violet eyes gleamed in the darkness, revealing her hidden strength and mystery. "Alaric," she whispered, her voice smooth as silk. "Do you know why you were summoned to Eldhaven?" "I don't," he replied, his tone steady, though his hand hovered near his blade. "Only that the king ordered it." Seraphine smirked, unfazed. "Then it's time you learned the truth about what lies beyond the kingdom's borders, and why your king may not be as loyal as you believe." Just as she spoke, a creature emerged from the shadows, a slithering, serpent-like beast called a silveren, with scales that shimmered in shades of green and blue. It twisted around Seraphine, its eyes glowing an ominous red. Alaric's heart raced, but he held his ground as the silveren lowered its head, acknowledging Seraphine's command. Chapter 2. Shadows of Deception. Alaric returned to the palace the next morning, the weight of Seraphine's words and the image of the silveren haunting him. The palace of Mithral Keep was a fortress of white stone, its towering spires reaching toward the sky like icy daggers. Massive banners bearing the serpent insignia hung along the castle walls, their edges fluttering in the breeze. Inside, tapestries woven with scenes of battles and mythical creatures lined the halls, each depicting the ancient history of a kingdom that was built upon secrets. King Valen summoned Alaric to the throne room, his gaze hard and calculating. Dressed in an intricate silver robe, the king's piercing eyes held a dangerous intelligence. "Where did you get this?" Valen asked, his voice echoing off the high stone walls as he held up a scroll sealed with an unfamiliar mark, a serpent entwined with a crown. Alaric hesitated. "From a sorceress named Seraphine," he answered. "She said there are truths I need to uncover." Valen's expression darkened, and his grip on the scroll tightened. "That woman is a menace. Her lies would poison your mind. He raised his voice, and a winged creature known as a Pharax perched on the throne's armrest, its piercing eyes fixed on Alaric. With feathers as dark as midnight and talons sharper than steel, the Pharax was a symbol of the king's reach and power, capable of spying and delivering messages across the kingdom. But as the king's words echoed, Alaric couldn't shake the feeling that Seraphine's warning held truth. The king's reaction was more than suspicion. It was fear. Chapter 3. The Prophecy. Despite the king's admonition, Alaric found himself drawn back to Eldhaven that night. Seraphine awaited him by an ancient stone circle, the ruins of a lost civilization swallowed by the forest. Strange glyphs glowed faintly on the stones, marking it as a place of forbidden power. "I knew you'd return," Seraphine murmured, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "The king wouldn't tell you the truth." She gestured to the air, and a swirling blue mist coalesced into the shape of a ruined kingdom. Shadows of mythical creatures, the towering draken with its sapphire scales and fiery breath, the wispy mistwalkers who could disappear at will, and the serpentine silverin moved within the vision. "The prophecy speaks of a ruler who will fall by his own bloodline," she said, her violet eyes intense. "The kingdom has hidden this for centuries, and you, Alaric, you are part of this prophecy." He felt the weight of her words press upon him, disbelief mixing with fear, and said, "Why would the king hide this?" "Because he fears it," Seraphine replied. "And he knows you may be the one to fulfill it." Chapter 4. The Assassin's Dagger. Alaric returned to Mithral Keep. The vision of the draken and the mistwalkers burned into his memory. That night, as he entered his chamber, a strange chill filled the air. Before he could react, a shadow lunged at him, an assassin cloaked in black, his face hidden behind a mask carved to resemble the face of a skullfang, a deadly creature known to haunt the mountains. The two clashed, their movements swift and brutal. Alaric dodged a blade meant for his throat and managed to disarm the assassin, holding him at sword point. Alaric demanded, "Who sent you?" The assassin's dark eyes glinted with defiance and replied, "Your king doesn't take well to traitors." The words stunned him, and in that moment of hesitation, the assassin dissolved into smoke, a creature of shadows known as a shade wraith. Alaric could only watch as the mist faded, leaving him alone with more questions. Chapter 5. Seraphine's Secret. Desperate for answers, Alaric found Seraphine once more, this time in a hidden grotto within Eldhaven. Bioluminescent fungi illuminated the walls with an eerie glow, casting shades of green and purple across her face as she traced runes in the damp earth. "You're back," she said, with a hint of amusement. "I see the king didn't welcome your curiosity." He approached her cautiously and asked, "Who are you, really?" Seraphine lowered her hood, revealing a delicate silver diadem etched with symbols of the ancient magic, resting on her dark hair. "I was once heir to the throne," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "Valen is my half-brother. He took the throne from me and would destroy anyone who threatens his rule." Just then, the ground trembled, and a massive, four-legged creature known as an Ironclaw emerged from the shadows, its body covered in scales as hard as steel. The beast's yellow eyes glowed with a fierce intelligence as it bowed before Seraphine. "He will kill you if you continue on this path," she warned, her gaze softening. "But with the right allies, even a tyrant can be dethroned." Chapter 6. The Alliance of Shadows. Alaric and Seraphine forged an uneasy alliance, uniting with warriors and magical creatures who remained loyal to her. They met allies deep within the Wyvern Peaks, where mist swirled around jagged cliffs, and great flying beasts known as skyrenders patrolled the skies. One of the warriors, a towering man named Roderick, with a long scar running down his face, gave Alaric a hard look and asked, "Can we trust you, soldier? Or are you just waiting to report back to Valen?" Seraphine stepped forward. "Roderick, he's seen the truth. The king's cruelty knows no bounds." As Alaric scanned the mountain range, watching the skyrenders swoop and dive, he felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. He was no longer just a loyal soldier. He was part of a revolution that could change the course of the kingdom. Chapter 7. The Web of Lies. In the hidden depths of the palace dungeons, Alaric and Seraphine discovered the final piece they needed, a crystal pendant known as the Heart of Mithral. The pendant hung suspended in a chamber surrounded by molten rock and guarded by an enchanted beast called the Ember Wraith. The creature was a towering, lion-like being with a mane of fire and molten eyes that burned with an otherworldly intensity. Flames licked across its fur as it prowled the perimeter, its gaze fixed on the pendant. Alaric tightened his grip on his sword, whispering to Seraphine, "How do we get past that thing?" Seraphine glanced at him and replied, her violet eyes gleaming. "The Heart of Mithral responds to royal blood. If I can get close enough to touch it, the creature will recognize me as the rightful heir." They edged forward, each step slow and calculated, but the Ember Wraith's gaze never wavered. Just as Seraphine reached out to touch the crystal, the creature roared, its flames intensifying. It rumbled, its voice deep and echoing. "Only a pure heart can wield the power." The warning filled the air as the flames grew hotter, forcing Alaric and Seraphine to back away. Desperate, Seraphine knelt, placing her hand over her heart. "I am the true heir. I seek to save the kingdom, not destroy it." After a tense moment, the Ember Wraith lowered its head, allowing her to pass. With a deep breath, she reached forward, her fingers brushing the crystal. It pulsed with a blinding light, sending a wave of power radiating through the chamber. The flames dimmed, and the creature stepped aside, acknowledging her claim. Alaric watched in awe as the pendant settled around Seraphine's neck, casting a protective aura over her. They had the power now, but with it came the knowledge that the final confrontation with Valen would be more perilous than anything they'd faced. Chapter 8. A Deadly Choice. Alaric and Seraphine returned to the palace under the cover of darkness, slipping through the labyrinthine halls toward the throne room. Statues of mythical guardians, stone carvings of dragons and griffins, lined the corridor leading to the throne, each one a silent witness to centuries of secrets. Inside, King Valen sat on his gilded throne, his face twisted into a smug smile as they entered. Beside him perched the Pharax, its wings folded, talons gleaming as it watched them with predatory interest. "So, my treacherous sister," Valen sneered, his voice laced with venom, "and my loyal knight, you think you can take what is rightfully mine?" Seraphine's hand moved to the pendant, its light flaring. "Your reign is over, Valen. This kingdom was never yours to begin with." Valen's laugh echoed through the hall. "Oh, you've brought the Heart of Mithral? How quaint. Did you really believe I would leave it unguarded?" He snapped his fingers, and the shadows in the room shifted, coalescing into creatures of nightmare, shade. Wraiths, their forms flickering in and out of existence, each armed with jagged spectral blades. Valen's eyes gleamed and spoke directly to Alaric. "Now, Alaric, prove your loyalty. Kill her, and I'll forgive your foolishness." Seraphine looked at Alaric, fear and resolve mingling in her gaze. "If you must choose, choose wisely. For your heart, not for the throne." Alaric's heart pounded as he took in the scene. He'd been loyal to Valen all his life, yet he knew he could never serve a man who would turn on his own blood, nor one who wielded darkness as a weapon. Gritting his teeth, he raised his sword. "We end this," he declared, stepping to Seraphine's side. Chapter 9. The Final Battle. The throne room erupted into chaos as Alaric and Seraphine fought side by side, battling Valen's summoned shade wraiths. Their blades clashed with ghostly swords, and Seraphine chanted incantations, her magic weaving protective wards that kept the shades at bay. Valen unleashed his own dark power, summoning a black mist that twisted and lashed like a living creature. The mist formed a serpent-like shape, its massive jaws snapping toward Alaric, who barely managed to dodge its strike. Alaric swung his sword, slicing through the darkness, but it quickly reformed, coiling around him, tightening like a vice. "Your loyalty is wasted," Valen hissed, his voice dripping with disdain. "I made you, Alaric. You owe me your life." Alaric struggled, gasping for breath, but Seraphine thrust her hand forward, the heart of Dral glowing bright. "Enough," she shouted, and a surge of energy burst from the pendant, severing the serpent and releasing Alaric. Valen stumbled, momentarily weakened, but his eyes burned with fury. He raised his hand, conjuring a massive, fiery vortex above them. The room shook, the air filled with heat and the stench of burning stone. But before he could release the spell, Seraphine took Alaric's hand, her voice calm and resolute. Together, they combined their power, her magic and his strength, merging as they launched one final assault. Their energy collided with Valen's spell in a blinding flash, and for a heartbeat, silence fell over the throne room. Then, with a shattering scream, Valen's spell backfired, consuming him in a storm of flames. His shadow flickered and disappeared, leaving nothing but a smoking void where he once stood. Chapter 10. A Kingdom Reclaimed. As dawn broke over the kingdom, Seraphine was crowned queen. Her people, who had long been weary of Valen's reign, gathered in the courtyard, murmuring with both awe and uncertainty as they watched her take the throne. Alaric stood at her side, still bearing the weight of the battle and the choices he'd made. He watched as mythical creatures from across the land came to pay homage to the new queen. The Iron Claw, the Ember Wraith, and even a majestic Sky Render bowed before Seraphine, acknowledging her as the true ruler of the land. Days passed, and under Seraphine's rule, the kingdom began to heal. She restored peace and made alliances with the magical creatures, treating them as protectors of the realm rather than enemies. The heart of Dral, worn around her neck, served as a reminder of the price they'd paid and the power that she now wielded wisely. One evening, as they stood on the palace balcony overlooking the kingdom, Alaric spoke quietly. "Will you be able to rule without losing yourself?" Seraphine looked at him, her gaze both gentle and fierce. "I hope so, Alaric. With you here, reminding me of what's right, I believe I can." He nodded, though a shadow of doubt lingered. Power had a way of corrupting even the purest of intentions, and he knew they would forever be vigilant against the darkness that still lurked within the kingdom's borders. But for now, they had won. The shadows had lifted, and as they watched the kingdom rebuild, both knew their journey was far from over. Yet, in the silence that followed, there was a quiet understanding. The kingdom had finally found its rightful ruler and its most loyal protector.